Hello, my name is Christopher Vivas,
My name is David Martinez.
and today I'm going to be guiding David on how to set up the back end and front end to run the Bookfinder application locally on your device. If you scroll down to prerequisites, you'll have a nice little list of what is required. We do recommend using Java 17 or older, or newer, sorry, PostgreSQL 8 or newer, having Git, Docker Desktop, and of course any modern web browser such as Google Chrome. So for our purposes, we're going to be using the GitHub application desktop to clone the repo. And by going into the installation guide, you can scroll down to the backend, the clone repository, get the URL for the backend. And once you clone the repo, the project's going to be opening up in your IDE of choice. For our purpose, we're going to be using IntelliJ. And you'll be able to see the project directory on the left side with all the modules for our application as well as configuration files. This one here is the Docker Compose configuration file. This is going to be what's required and necessary to set up and run a PostgreSQL database locally using a Docker container. The application file next to the Docker Compose file is going to house all the necessary credentials needed for our database, JWT tokens, and AWS service. So to set up these variables, as you can see, we're using placeholders. So one of the quickest ways to do it is by using a .env file. And you can see following the example in the installation guide, you can set up your username, secrets, expirations, and all the necessary AWS credentials so that the application runs smoothly. Another way to do this is by visiting the configuration settings in the IDE and adding them there. By going to environment variables, you're able to add each one by one. So DB username, DB password, JWT secret, and so on. So after you set up your variables, the next step is to get the Docker container running with the PostgreSQL database. Quickest way to do that is by visiting the terminal in the IDE. And we can use the docker compose up-d command that's found in the installation guide to get the Docker container running. As you can see, everything's been created, but to double check, you can always visit the Docker desktop application, which is necessary also to be open when running the application. And you can see that the database has been created. So after this step, you are pretty much ready to go for the backend. So we can actually run the application now. And Spring Boot will always run like this. It'll throw its little ASCII design. And by default, Spring Boot always runs localhost 8080, which is going to be needed later on when we set up the front end. And that moves us up to the front end. So for the front end, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be using GitHub desktop app. And by going to the front end setup of the installation guide, we can grab the GitHub URL. And after cloning that repo, again, in your IDE of choice, the project should open. And we'll go and visit that now. So the front end's going to be a lot simpler. There's not going to be much to do. It's pretty much ready to go. The only thing we do want to make note of is our project right now is running on a Railway server, but for you and to run it locally, you're going to want to change the API base constant variable inside your JavaScript files to the HTTP localhost 8080 URL. After that, you should be ready to go. And instead of having to rely on React or Vue or any other third party, we're going to just host the front end on a local Python server. Um, and we can do that easily by going to the terminal and running the Python 3 m http dot server 5500. And after you run that command, you can see that we now have our port 5500 running. And if we visit localhost 5050 on the web browser, it should open up to our application. All right, and here we are at our Bookfinder application. Since we did create a new database, there's not going to be any credentials in there. So just to set it up and test real quick, David, why don't you go ahead and create an account? So you can see that all the front end pages are loading properly, and we are being able to make a connection to our back end using the API calls. And yeah, there we go. That concludes our installation and setup to run the Bookfinder application. From here, you can start coding on your own and make any pushes you want to the GitHub repo. Thank you so much.